Hi, I'm Mr. Jansen, and today we're going to use the breath to quiet the mind. Okay? Or more specifically, we're going to use the suspension of breath. Right? So that's the stillness of breath, the holding of the breath in or out. And I'll explain a little bit about what we're trying to achieve, and then we'll talk about how we're going to achieve that. So, first thing we need to understand is a little bit about the mind and our relationship to the mind. We have a tendency to get so caught up in our thoughts, so caught up in the processes of the mind, that we actually begin to believe that we are the mind. And one of our biggest jobs as a student of yoga is to make this distinction, is to recognize the difference between ourselves and our minds. Okay, so we think of the self as awareness, right? And that awareness is moving through the mind. So as we think a thought, our awareness moves to that thought. And then, as we think another thought, our awareness will move to that thought, and then to another thought, right? And we move through thoughts and emotions and such things in this way, right? So, because of this process, the mind is very busy, and we are constantly moving from thought to thought to thought to thought, and it can be rather exhausting, and we can also get caught up in some negative thought patterns, right, and that can spiral out of control. Once we latch onto one thought, it leads to another thought, which leads to another thought, and it's important to recognize that we are not this process, we are not the mind itself, but awareness moving through the mind. And once we recognize that we are awareness moving through the mind, we can start to take control of that process. Right? So a good way to think of this, to visualize this, right, is to imagine that the mind and all the thoughts swirling through it are like a hurricane. Right? And a hurricane, all these winds and everything is swirling around in a circle. And right at the center you have the eye of the hurricane. Right? And that eye of the hurricane is completely calm, right? It's this one space right in the center where there's no activity, no wind, nothing swirling around. It's completely still, right? So the mind is swirling around that space of stillness. All right, and we are, as awareness, can choose to be caught up in the mind, swirling around through this hurricane of thought, or we can choose to step out of it into the eye of the hurricane, into this place of stillness. And this is the process of meditation, okay? Is recognizing that we are awareness moving through the mind and that we have a choice as to where that awareness is going. So we latch onto a thought, right? We can either continue to ride that thought around the hurricane, swirling endlessly, or we can choose, I'm going to step out and take a break. All right? And this is what the process of meditation is. Now, a lot of people try meditation, and they think that what meditation is just remaining in that space of stillness, right? Turning off the mind. And that if you're a good meditator, you should be able to sit down and turn off the mind. Right? But whether you've been practicing meditation for 2 days or 40 years, when you sit down and try to turn off the mind, guess what happens? The mind turns on and thoughts come up. Okay? So it doesn't matter how good you are at meditation. Being good at meditation is not being able to sit down and turn off the mind. Right? The art in meditation is just knowing what that process is, okay? So what we're trying to do is to sit in that space of stillness beyond thought, okay? The eye of the hurricane. We want to hold our awareness there, but it's not going to stay there. It's going to come out, our awareness is going to latch onto a thought. And then as a meditator, our job is to recognize that has happened and come back, right? And then another thought, our awareness will wander to another thought, and then we bring it back to stillness. And then it latches onto another thought, and we bring it back to stillness. And this is the process. And the more you do this, the more control you start to have over this process. And in the beginning, and even sometimes later down the road, there's going to be days where you might latch onto thought for 10 minutes. You know, you might sit down to meditate for 10 minutes, and you might spend half the time or even the whole time just thinking, right? And other days, you'll recognize right away and you'll come back. And you might sit in that space for 10 seconds, that space of stillness, and go to another thought. It might be 20 seconds, maybe a minute. If you can sit there for a minute, that's really good. Okay? But you're just going back and forth. And eventually you're gaining control, so when you get caught in a train of thought that's giving you anxiety, causing you stress and worry, you're just gaining the ability to step out of that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. But first what we need to do is to recognize what that space feels like. Where is that space? What is that space? Okay? And if you try to sit down for 10 minutes and hold on to that space, again, you're not going to be able to do it. It's easy to sit there for a few seconds at a time. Right? Into the eye of the hurricane, into the space of stillness, thoughtlessness. Okay? So we want to get to that space, but the best way to do it is to do it in intervals or short periods, right? So what we can do is we can work with the breath. Take a nice deep breath, we hold that breath for 5 seconds. And during that 5 seconds, we try to have no thoughts for 5 seconds. Completely calm the mind, and just don't allow your awareness to move into any thoughts for 5 seconds. And we can do that. Okay? Then we breathe the air out, we suspend the breath out, and we hold for 5 seconds again. So every time we hold the breath, we're holding that breath for 5 seconds, and during that period, we're thinking no thoughts. Okay? So this is going to give us a practical understanding, a familiarity with the desired state that we're going after, without trying to sit there for this long period of a time which is unachievable. Right? So we want small, achievable intervals of meditation. But meditation, again, is the process of this moving back and forth. You're not better at meditation because you had less thoughts. In fact, the more thoughts you have, the more opportunities you have to practice this act of meditation, of latching onto a thought, letting it go, and coming back. It's this recognizing and this letting go. That's the skill you want to achieve. So the more thoughts you have, the more opportunity you have to practice that skill. Right? So each thought is a blessing. So don't have these this judgment on yourself. You know, there's no point in getting stressed out about how well you're meditating. That's pretty counterproductive. Okay, so we want to stay calm and relaxed through the process, recognizing a thought, not judging it, just letting it continue on its way as we return back to this calm space at the eye of the hurricane. Right? This is the mind. We are the awareness moving through the mind. We're going from the thoughts back to the eye, back to the stillness. Okay? And again, the way we're going to do this is through breath. So, come sitting up nice and tall. And We're just going to inhale through the nose. We're going to exhale also through the nose. And I want you to just take a nice, slow, long, deep breath. We're going to fill up into the abdomen, up into the chest, up into the collarbone, get a real full breath. We're going to hold that breath for 5 seconds. We're going to exhale very slowly and calmly, and we're going to hold that breath out for 5 seconds. Now, you can let the mind be as active as it wants to be while you're inhaling and while you're exhaling, but while you're holding that breath, I want you to let that be completely still. Okay, so be in the eye of the hurricane. Be in that place of stillness. And breathe with me. Inhale. Hold that breath. Exhale, nice and slow. Hold the breath out. Inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Inhale. Hold the breath. No thoughts. Exhale. Hold the breath out. No thoughts. Inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale. Continue to breathe on your own. Stick with this pattern on every breath suspension. Just letting the mind be completely still. Finding that space beyond the mind. In the eye of the hurricane. Completely calm, completely still. Let the mind be as active as it wants to be while inhaling and while exhaling. But as you hold that breath, as the breath is still, the mind is still. Continue with this as long as you like. Alright, if you can do this just for a couple minutes every day, that would be fantastic. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at this process, and the better you're going to understand this space of meditation. And we'll dig further into meditation and do some longer meditations as we go. And we'll experiment with some different things, but this is going to give you a great understanding of the process and what that space is that you're looking for in meditation. Thank you so much for practicing with me today.